Join us as we delve into the somber narrative of Absalom's rebellion and his ultimate fate, marked by pride, arrogance, and defiance against God's chosen king. Explore the symbolic significance of Absalom's burial, reminiscent of historical figures who met similar ends due to their rebellion. Welcome again, brothers and sisters. What a joy it is to have you in our Bible study today. In the previous lesson, we delved into a significant episode in the life of David as he faced a tumultuous spirit in his life. His own son, Absalom, led a rebellion against him, thrusting David into a state of turmoil and exile from Jerusalem. We witnessed the contrasting counsel of two advisors, Ahithophel and Hushai, to Absalom, with Hushai covertly working for David's benefit. Hushai's counsel urged Absalom to gather a massive army from across Israel, delaying an immediate confrontation with David, allowing the veteran king time to regroup. Absalom chose this advice over Ahithophel's more aggressive approach as it seemed wiser. Meanwhile, David, accompanied by loyal followers, crossed the Jordan River, seeking refuge in Mahanaim. During this period of uncertainty, various allies provided crucial support to David, sending supplies to alleviate the hardships faced by him and his followers. The narrative showcased David's resilience and the political intricacies of the time, demonstrating how alliances, counsel, and timing played pivotal roles in shaping the outcome. Today we shall study about the love of David for his son Absalom's tragic end.
Absalom now has gotten together a great army from all the tribes of Israel and they pursue David. Remember, David had spent a great deal of his life running away from Saul. In this instance, of course, it is indirectly related because of his sin, David's sin. David is actually in a very difficult position. He had left Jerusalem without any preparation whatsoever. Those who were loyal to him had fled with him. Verse 24 and 25 of 2 Samuel chapter 17. David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Amasa was the son of a man named Jether, an Israelite who had married Abigail, the daughter of Nahash and sister of Zeruiah, the mother of Joab. Let's get this now. Now, who is Amasa? If you look closely, you will find out that he is David's sister's son. Amasa is David's nephew, just as Joab was. Joab was the son of Zeruiah, the sister of David. And Amasa is the son of Abigail, the other sister of David. Now, what do we have here? It's not simply a civil war of two disconnected people groups. It's actually a family feud. David's nephew Amasa has taken sides with his cousin Absalom, while Joab, another nephew of David, supports David. Now, if we were to read between these lines, you will see that David has a partial support from his own father's home. It would be most probable that some of his own brothers or sisters would have deserted him, apart from his own son Absalom, who's trying to get rid of David. A whole nation is being torn apart because there is division within the family of David. A whole nation is at war and turmoil because there's tension between two members of the same family. Isn't this frightening? I'd like to stress here again to you, dear parents, please don't neglect your children. If you would recall Absalom, Absalom is actually reacting to David's way of dealing with Ammon. Remember, David didn't deal with Amnon, who committed incest with Absalom's sister Tamar. After Absalom killed Amnon, Absalom fled, and David refused to see him, even though Absalom desired to greet his father. David could have prevented this rebellion if he had probably been a more gracious father. Your children should be top priority. Including your serving else should be rated second, or more lower down the list. You may not see the results now, but the time invested with your children will solidify the foundations of your influence. Note, I use the word invested with your children. Never ever think that time with your children is sacrifice. No, it's not sacrifice. It's time invested. In the long run, you will be the winner. Verse 26 now, the Israelites and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. In the next few verses, we read that David finds that he has many allies in the people round about. They know David and the warrior that he is. The rulers of these kingdoms probably have very little confidence in Absalom, knowing that he is deceitful and tricky. He would not be dependable. They do, however, have confidence in David. Therefore, they bring supplies to David and his men to ease their hardship. Absalom's delay enables David to get supplies from his allies and readies his troops for combat. Let's get to chapter 18 now. 2 Samuel chapter 18, verses 1 and 2. David mustered the men who were with him and appointed over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. David sent the troops out, a third under the command of Joab, a third under Joab's brother Abishai son of Zeruiah, and a third under Ittai the Gittite. The king told the troops, I myself will surely march out with you. David wanted to go into battle with his men. Verse 3, but the men said, You must not go out. If we are forced to flee, they won't care about us. Even if half of us die, they won't care. But you are worth 10,000 of us. It would be better now for you to give us support from the city. The army refused to let David go into battle. Verses 4 and 5. The king answered, I will do whatever seems best to you. So the king stood beside the gate, while all the men marched out in units of hundreds and of thousands. The king commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. And all the troops heard the king giving orders concerning Absalom to each of the commanders. This is one of the saddest chapters in David's life. While the chapter of David's sin is probably the most sordid chapter, this is the saddest because it records the death of his own son Absalom. Because they have urged him not to go with them to battle, David takes his place at the side of the gate as the army marches out. It marches out under three leaders, Joab, Abishai, and Ittai. As each of these three captains comes by, David charges them to deal gently with his son. Whatever Absalom was up to, David can never forget his little boy. Absalom, after all, he was David's son. All the army heard him give this order. I think some smiled, but others felt a bit resentful. Absalom would always be a troublemaker, and they would like to get him eliminated. However, David loved his son and did not want him to die. He said to his commanders, Deal gently with my boy Absalom. David's men heard what he said. Verses 6 and 7. The army marched into the field to fight Israel, and the battle took place in the forest of Ephraim. There the army of Israel was defeated by David's men, And the casualties that day were great, 20,000 men. This was a civil war, all right. It was terrible. Brothers would have been fighting brothers, confusion, divided homes, the sadness of brother fighting against brother. David was a strategist and a general, and Absalom did not have anyone in his group who could match David's ability, or the ability of David's three captains, Joab, Abishai, and Ittai. Therefore, obviously, the children of Israel lost the battle. Verse 8. The battle spread out over the whole countryside, and the forest claimed more lives that day than the sword. The troops of Absalom became entangled in the woods of Ephraim when they attempted to flee from David's army. They become bottled in, and the forest became the cause of death for many of them more than the sword. They had picked the wrong place to battle with David. Verses 9 and 10. Now Absalom happened to meet David's men. He was riding his mule, and as the mule went under the thick branches of a large oak, Absalom's head got caught in the tree. He was left hanging in midair, while the mule he was riding kept on going. When one of the men saw this, he told Joab, I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree. Apparently, Absalom's head got caught in the branches of an oak tree while he was riding his mule through the woods. He was running away, and by the way, when he got caught in the tree, the mule kept going right ahead, leaving Absalom in quite a state. Under those circumstances, this incident would be rather humorous, but it's not in this case. Verse 11. Joab said to the man who had told him this, What? You saw him? Why didn't you strike him to the ground right there? Then I would have had to give you 10 shekels of silver and a warrior's belt. This man is shocked that Joab would want the prince, the son of David, killed. But the man replied, verse 12, Even if 1,000 shekels were weighed out into my hands, I would not lift my hand against the king's son. In our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, protect the young man Absalom for my sake. Verse 13, And if I had put my life in jeopardy, and nothing is hidden from the king, you would have kept your distance from me. The soldier said, The king told us not to touch his son, and if I had done anything to him, you would have punished me yourself. But Joab did not have time to argue with him. He had a matter of business to take care of immediately. Verse 14 to 17. Joab said, I am not going to wait like this for you. So he took 3 javelins in his hand and plunged them into Absalom's heart, while Absalom was still alive in the oak tree. And 10 of Joab's armor-bearers surrounded Absalom, struck him, and killed him. Then Joab sounded the trumpet, and the troops stopped pursuing Israel, for Joab halted them. They took Absalom, threw him into a big pit in the forest, and piled up a large heap of rocks over him. Meanwhile, all the Israelites fled to their homes. When Absalom was dead, the rebellion was over. Joab, however, had no right to kill Absalom, especially after David had given the command that he was not to be touched. However, he is weary of all the trouble Absalom has caused, and he knows that the death of this boy will end the rebellion. Note again, he has been killing people who are unarmed, helpless. Here it is a cold-blooded, heartless man in action, even as he kills a man who is totally helpless. Joab was reluctant to let Ahimaaz bear the news of Absalom's death to David, because he did not have all the necessary information to give the king. Verse 19, Now Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, Let me run and take the news to the king, that the Lord has delivered him from the hand of his enemies. You are not the one to take the news today, Joab told him. You may take the news another time, but you must not do so today because the king's son is dead." Then Joab said to a Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." The Cushite bowed down before Joab and ran off. Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, again said to Joab, "Come what may, please let me run behind the Cushite." But Joab replied, "My son, why do you want to go? You don't have any news that will bring you a reward." He said, "Come what may, I want to run." So Joab said, "Run." Then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran the Cushite. This now is one of the most touching scenes in the Word of God. David is sitting in the gate of the city, anxiously waiting for word to be brought to him. A father anxiously waits to get news of his prodigal son. Let's read on. Verse 24. While David was sitting between the inner and outer gates, the watchman went up to the roof of the gateway by the wall. As he looked out, he saw a man running alone. Verse 25. The watchman called out to the king and reported it. The king said, "If he is alone, he must have good news." And the man came closer and closer. Then the watchman saw another man running, and he called down to the gatekeeper, "Look, another man running alone." The king said, "He must be bringing good news too." The watchman said, "It seems to me that the first one runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok." "He is a good man," the king said. "He comes with good news." Then Ahimaaz called out to the king, "All is well." He bowed down before the king with his face to the ground and said, "Praise be to the Lord your God. He has delivered up the men who lifted their hands against my lord the king." The king asked, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" Ahimaaz answered, "I saw great confusion just as Joab was about to send the king's servant and me, your servant, but I don't know what it was." David has but one question to ask Ahimaaz. Is the young man Absalom safe? But Ahimaaz did not have all the necessary information to tell the king. He did not know that Absalom was dead. Verse 31. Then the Cushite arrived and said, "My lord the king, hear the good news. The Lord has delivered you today from all who rose up against you." Notice that David's first question is about Absalom. His chief concern is not for who won the battle, but for the safety of Absalom. Verse 32. The king asked the Cushite, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" The Cushite replied, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up to harm you be like that young man." The Cushite has the correct information. He is gently telling David that Absalom is dead. Then follows David's mourning for his son. It is the most touching expression of grief in the Bible or in any other literature. Verse 33. The king was shaken. He went up to the room over the gateway and wept. As he went, he said, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom. If only I had died instead of you. O Absalom, my son, my son." What a tragic end of a prodigal son who went astray. He took matters in his own hands, and being overly ambitious and proud, he spelled doom for his career. On the other hand, we see a father totally broken. He knows deep inside that he is the cause for not bringing up his son in the right way. Parents have neglected their cries of hurt and pain, and there is a tragic end. I hope this would not be the story of your life. If you are a parent, my dear friend, get to know your child. Get to understand him in a deeper way. If you are a son or a daughter, accept the fact that your parents are just as human. They have got their flaws. Please don't try and teach them a lesson by rebelling or walking out on them. Let God take control of your situation. He will deal with what is wrong in your parents. Let God take charge of your life. As we close, let's thank God for our Heavenly Father who gave us all so that we can live right. But we rebelled like Absalom and went astray. But our God loved us so much that He sent His only Son from heaven to help us in our time of need. He understands. He knows our weaknesses and our failures. Dear friend, Christ Jesus came to give us hope in an unjust, sinful, and chaotic world.
The burial place and manner of Absalom's burial carries symbolic significance. It's noted that he was buried as an accursed man, much like others in history who faced severe consequences for their actions. This includes Achan, who was stoned to death and buried under a pile of stones, and the king of Ai, who was hanged on a tree and similarly covered with stones. Absalom, as a rebelled and fratricide, met a similar fate due to his hanging on a tree. Absalom, once a darling of all people and a charismatic leader who challenged David's reign, his pride, arrogance, and rebellion against God's chosen king ultimately led to his tragic end. The narrative of his demise reflects a broader pattern seen in history where the wicked fall from positions of power and end up in ruin. The passage serves as a true picture of illustrating the fate of those who oppose God's kingdom, His chosen leaders, or His people. It emphasizes the sobering truth that those who stand against God's purposes would face dire consequences. The closing lines of the passage express a sense of security and peace for those who are instructed by God's law, even in difficult times, while a pit is prepared for the wicked. May God give you a beautiful evening ahead.